In this video, we are going to learn about some of the brushes within Zbrush. This is not an exhaustive list of brushes by any means. It's just some of the brushes that I use most often in my workflow and some that will help you get started with sculpting in the software. Before we take a look at the different brushes, I'm just going to go over the ways to use any brush within the software. I'm going to use the standard brush as the example. You can see I'm on the standard brush on the top left because this is the default brush within the software. When you're using a brush, you have usually for anything that you can use to sculpt on the software, anything that either raises or puts the surface down, you have two options. You have Z add, so on the top you have Z add, you can see it's set to that, and you have Z sub, which is Z subtract. So if you're on Z sub, it moves the mesh inwards, you're sculpting inwards, and if you're on Z add, it moves the mesh outwards. And you can do the opposite of what it says up here by holding down Alt when you're using the brush. So I'm on Z add right now, so this is without holding down Alt. And if I hold down Alt, it does the exact opposite of that. So usually I don't change this. So if the standard brush is set to Z add by default, I don't change that. I just alternate between using Alt and then not using Alt as I'm using the brush. And you also have your focal shift, which, as we've discussed before, changes your alpha. So the standard brush doesn't have an alpha, so we'll actually take a look at this with one of the other brushes. Apart from that, you have your draw size up here. You can change it through the slider. You'll notice that you can make it bigger or smaller. But what I use is I just use S on the keyboard, and you can get the slider wherever you are. So if I'm sculpting over here and I click on S, I can change this size from right over here. You also have your Z intensity. So the Z intensity is up here, and that's just how much the brush raises the surface. If you use a pen tablet, which is what you should be using, you can control some of this intensity by just changing your tablet pressure. So this is a lower pressure that I'm applying, and this is a higher pressure that I'm applying with my tablet. So use a tablet for ZBrush. If you use a mouse, you are just bound to whatever the intensity is. So with a mouse, no matter what I do, it just stays within the same intensity. So that's the standard brush. And let's look at how the brush shortcuts work. You can select any brush from up here. If you click on the brush option here, you can select the brushes from here, but you will want to learn the shortcuts so that you can work quicker. The shortcut for a brush that I really like, which is the move brush, is B, M, V. And how this works is that, so if I hit B, I open up the brush menu. And if I hit M, I basically isolate the brushes that start with M. So you'll see all of these brushes start with M. And then V is just the code for the move brush. So you'll see that V is what's written here right next to the move brush. So if I hit that, I open up that particular brush. So each brush has its own code. So each brush usually has a shortcut that is composed of 3 letters. I'm just going to go with the move and show you how that works. So I can change the draw size and just use this to move the mesh around. And I usually don't change the Z add or Z sub. I don't think it makes a difference. This is just to move the mesh around and create the shape that you want. I often use this in early stages to change the shape of the mesh, and I usually use it with a lower number of subdivisions. So you can see this is a pretty dense mesh with a lot of polygons. I usually use this at a lower level because it's then easier to move these polygons around. This is a pretty straightforward brush. Let me undo all those settings and let's look at the damp standard brush, which is another one that I use often. So the damp standard is B to open up the brush menu, D, and that isolates the D brushes, and the damp standard is S. So the shortcut is B, D, S. This brush is similar to the standard, but the thing that I like about it is that it gives you this sharper line, and you can see that this is the alpha that you get. So you get a sharper inward action on the brush. And for this brush, since we have an alpha, we can change it to see how that affects it. So the default for the focal shift of the brush is -14. And if I lower that significantly to -93, you can see that the brush acts slightly differently. And it gives you a different fall off. And if I increase that significantly, it performs in a different way. So the focal shift, basically what it does is it changes whether this alpha is more sharp or whether it is more blurry. And that is going to change how your brush reacts when you draw with it. And for the damp standard, it's a very similar settings to the standard brush. You have Z add, Z sub, and you hold down Alt to change the direction that the mesh is deforming in. Another one that I like, let me just draw something with this brush. Another brush that I like is the H polish, and that is B, H, P. And that just lets you polish the mesh. So if you've drawn something and you want to sort of flatten it and polish it down like you were filing down the clay, that's what you would use. So the H polish just sort of adds that flattened, polished effect to the mesh. And then you have the clay buildup, which is really nice because you get a nice clay effect to the mesh. So B, C, B is the clay buildup, and you can draw on the mesh and it builds it up like you would do with clay. So the clay buildup and the H polish work very well together. So clay buildup and then BHP for H polish, and you polish out whatever you've built up. Then you have inflate, which is BIN. And that'll just, I'm going to make this bigger, it's just going to inflate the mesh. If you hold down Alt, it is going to deflate the mesh. One brush that works in conjunction with all of these other brushes is the smooth brush. You can activate this by holding down Shift on any brush you're on. So right now I'm on a brush called Trim Dynamic. If I hold down Shift, you'll see that the brush on the left changes to smooth. So now I can smooth out whatever I have sculpted. And it just, you're able to smooth out any sharp parts or anything that you've built up that is not entirely smooth. And when you hold down Shift, you can also change the intensity of the smooth brush. So I'm just going to undo this and hold down Shift. You'll notice that the C intensity of the smooth brush is 100%. You could also make this a lower number so that it's not as harsh while smoothing out, and you get a different result.